Hi guys, today I'm going to film my favourite authors video. So I'm going to tell you why I like these authors, what are my recommendations to start with their books, which books I still want to read by them, and their writing projects in the works. A warning beforehand, with some of these authors I only read like one book or two books or three books, or most of them actually. I still consider them to be my favourite authors, so I will still mention them and I will still talk about them because I still consider them my favourite authors. It doesn't matter how many books I read by them. The first author I'm going to talk about is my number one favourite author, and that's Benjamin Alire Sáenz. Benjamin is my absolute favourite author because I read his most popular book, Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets in the Universe, back in 2014, that's last year. When I wasn't feeling really well. I started reading last year again because I wasn't feeling great about myself, and his book, Aristotle and Dante, kind of saved my life in a way. Benjamin knows how to write a book. He has this amazing poetic writing style, and I say this a lot, but he has this poetic writing style that's absolutely amazing. He knows how to word things so beautifully that you just want to keep reading and reading and reading and rereading his books. For Benjamin, I read 3 of his books and I want to read all of his books eventually, but I think not all of his books are translated to English because he's a Mexican author. The first book I read by Benjamin was Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, which is obviously about Aristotle and Dante. There's also an LGBT book. I don't consider that a spoiler anymore. I did first, but not anymore after watching a couple of videos. There's an LGBT book, again, and it's about Aristotle, who is a really, really angry teen, and he doesn't know what to do with his own thoughts and with his body and with himself as a person. And then Dante comes into his life. They meet at a swimming pool, and Dante has a peculiar way of looking at the world, and they're both loners, but these loners who didn't really have any friends beforehand became really great friends. And you notice this in the way they think about each other, mostly about Aristotle, obviously, because it's written from Aristotle's point of view. It's written in one point of view, and that is Aristotle's. Dante's point of view is not written. But I think Benjamin wants to write a book from Dante's point of view, but don't quote me on that though. The second book I read was Last Night I Sang to the Monster, which is a beautiful title, by the way. All his books have such beautiful and meaningful titles. It's about Zach, who's 18, and instead of in high school, he is in rehab because he's an alcoholic. And this book plays out in rehab and the relationships Zach forms in rehab and what actually happened to him. There are also such beautiful passages in this book, and on the synopsis on Goodreads is such a beautiful passage, and I want to read it to you. I have it in my head that when we're born, God writes things down in our hearts. See, on some people's hearts he writes happy, and on some people's hearts he writes sad, and on some people's hearts he writes crazy. On some people's hearts he writes genius, and on some people's hearts he writes angry, and on some people's hearts he writes winner, and on some people's hearts he writes loser. It's all like a game to him. Him. God. And it's all pretty much random. He takes out his pen and starts writing on our blank hearts. When it came to my turn, he wrote sad. I don't like God very much. Apparently, he doesn't like me very much either. Which is absolutely gorgeous, right? That is gorgeous writing, and this is exactly why I'm so stoked about Benjamin Alire Sáenz, because he writes so beautiful and I can recognize myself in so much he actually writes. The third book I read by Benjamin Alire Sáenz was Sammy and Juliana in Hollywood, and this title may not seem like much, but this title is actually really meaningful when you read the book. This book is about Sammy, who falls in love with Juliana in the summer before his senior year. And this book is about so much more than Sammy's love for Juliana. It's about Sammy as a person, and I really adored Sammy. All of Benjamin's books also have such high ratings on Goodreads, and I really get that. I want to read all of his books. I want to absorb them all in my skin. For his writing projects, I know Benjamin is writing a new book, which is set to be published in 2016, which is called The Inexplicable Logic of My Heart, which I also have on my TBR because I love the title. There's no synopsis or a cover yet, or an exact release date, except for 2016, but I really, really love the title, and I know I will love his book because I adore his writing style. I adore him as a person, even though I don't know him. Through his writing, I feel like I know the person behind the book. For recommendations, I recommend you start with Aristotle and Dante, Discover the Secrets of the Universe, because that's the first book I read and the first book I fell in love with by him. And after that, I think you can pick, because I think every single book he writes is beautiful, even though I haven't read all of his books. But I recommend you start with Aristotle and Dante and then pick one for yourself, like the synopsis that speaks most to you. My second favourite author in that order is Danielle Steel. Danielle Steel, who is a woman who writes adult novels for a very long time already. And I actually fell in love with the first book I read by her, and it was given to me by my mom, I think, and it's called The Long Road Home. I have it in physical copy. It's really weird to hold such a face next to my head, but okay. This is the Dutch copy of The Long Road Home, but this was a really, really, really adult novel, but I adored it. I think I was like 9 or something when I first read this. I never reread it, but I was 9 when I first read this, and it captivated me, and I wanted to read so much more by Danielle Steel after that. The weird thing is, I've only read 2 books by Danielle Steel, but I have a lot more on my shelf, which I'm going to show to you now. So these are the books I have on my shelf. I have 5 Days in Paris. I have Answered Prayers, The Wrench, Golden Moments, Impossible, and last but probably not least, H.R.H. Those are the 6 books I have on my TBR by Danielle Steel. And I also have another book which I have read, because I read two books by Danielle Steel yet. One of them being The Long Road Home, and the second one being A Good Woman by Danielle Steel. The Long Road Home is about 7-year-old Gabriella, who is in an abusive home situation. When Gabriella's parents split, her father disappears and her mother drops her off at a convent where she is destined to become a nun. Eventually, Gabriella, when she's older, meets Father Joe Connors, and their relationship goes so far as to where Joe has to choose between Gabriella and his priesthood. I rated this book 4 out of 5 stars because I absolutely adored it back then, and this is a shocking book. This is a shocking book. You have to be prepared to be heartbroken to read this book. Good Woman is about Annabelle, who loses her father and brother due to the sinking of the Titanic. Annabelle flees to war-ravaged France to lose herself in a life of service. There she finds her true calling. She's working at a hospital as an ambulance medic. When the war ends, Annabelle goes to Paris and becomes a doctor. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars, but there was a weird thing happening in this book which I really did not like. Well, I thought it was funny and it wasn't supposed to be funny. But I still gave it 5 out of 5 stars because it felt like I was living a whole life with Annabelle, which is basically true. Because I think it follows 7 or 8 years of her life, I think. I don't know for sure, but I think it does. And the ending was, this is a really realistic book, except for the parts where something funny happens, which is not supposed to be funny. But this is the life of a woman in the First World War. And these things in this book could have really happened. Danielle Steel always writes about women. She writes women's fiction. And all these stories are so realistic and they could have really happened, and you can just lose yourself in her stories, and that's why I really like Danielle Steel. As a recommendation, I would really recommend you read The Long Road Home as a first book, and then pick whatever you please again. But The Long Road Home really brought me to like her books, and really Look at those pages, it's so yellow. This book is so old. Anyway, I would recommend reading this one first. The last author I'm going to talk about is Marisha Pessl. Marisha Pessl is the author of Night Film, which came out in 2014, and I read it this year. It was one of my favorite books of the year. I rated it 5 out of 5 stars. And this book is about Scott McGrath, who's obsessed with his filmmaker whose daughter just died, and it was ruled a suicide, but he wants to prove it was not a suicide, and becomes totally obsessed with proving it was not a suicide, but it was actually something sinister and something darker than that. Night Film made me fall in love with Marisha Pessl. Marisha Pessl doesn't have that many books out. She also has another book out, which was her first book. Night Film was her second book. Her first book was Special Topics in Calamity Physics, and I actually tried to read Special Topics in Calamity Physics, but I just read The Secret History before that one, and it was basically a copy of The Secret History, and it was also all over in the reviews, so it was really weird. I read The Secret History right before starting Special Topics in Calamity Physics. So it was a really thick book, so I DNF'd it. I couldn't finish it. I wasn't interested. So it's a bit weird. Maybe I would name her as my favourite author, but I think Marisha Pessl is my favourite author because I was so enchanted by Night Film, and I would read everything she writes. Honestly, even though I really did not like Special Topics in Calamity Physics, I would still read her grocery list, basically. I think I like Marisha Pessl as much as I do because she knows how to build atmosphere and how to build an ambiance and how to keep it suspenseful, because Night Film was a really thick book, and I have to say, nothing much really happened. It was more like Scott's thoughts and the whole atmosphere, and she knows how to write it. I enjoyed every single page of Night Film. So for Marisha Pessl, I would recommend reading Night Film. You really have to read it. It's amazing. It's filled with these illustrations that only make the story better. It's a really great story, and I can't imagine you not liking it. So there we have it. Those are my favourite authors, and it's probably a really long video again. Whoops! But I really like making this video and talking about my favourite authors, and I hope you liked it as much as I did, and you know where to start with these authors now, if you want to start reading these authors. So I'll see you soon, guys, like on Saturday, so look forward to that. Goodbye!